The evening, the savannah itself trembled. As darkness first descended, the ground itself seemed to thrum with a palpable energy, for out in the tall grass, a lion moved with deadly intent. In these lands where one predator walks, another is sure to respond. That evening, the savannah held a collective breath, anticipating the eruption of a story years in its creation. A fragile alliance, a returning exile, and a pride facing total ruin. This was the very instant fate's grip began to constrict around every lion that called this place home. At the core of this domain, two formidable dynasties, the Ember Pride and the Stonecrest Pride, had carved their legacy into the landscape through victory and sorrow. Their chronicles were etched deep, marked by silent triumphs and scars barely remembered, yet a new tempest was gathering on the horizon. An outcast once driven into exile had returned to his birthright, bearing the heavy burden of his years in the wilderness. His mere presence altered the atmosphere, redirecting the herds and changing the currents of the wind, a clear omen that the delicate equilibrium between order and anarchy was about to shatter. And so our chronicle commences. For those captivated by tales of survival, the dynamics of power and the untamed splendor of nature, be sure to subscribe and drop a 1 in the comments to witness the next chapter, or leave a 2 if you want us to hold the story at this point. A shadow falls on the Ember Pride. With the first light of day, the Ember Pride glided like phantoms over the plains, every lion moving with an assurance honed by generations of endurance. Yet a current of unease flowed beneath that self-possession. Their domain had been secure for seasons, but now subtle signs of encroachment snapped. Twigs, unfamiliar prints, faint sounds on the wind suggested a trespasser was probing their boundaries. The lionesses were the first to detect it, their intuition heightening as they steered their cubs along more secure routes. Even the pride's ascendant male, still growing into his mantle of leadership, could feel the strain coiling in the air. A great distance to the west, the Stonecrest Pride observed these developments with a wary eye. They understood that pressure on one dynasty would inevitably spill over to the next. Their grizzled patriarch, battle-worn but unyielding, scanned the horizon with quiet contemplation. He knew alliances were fragile, old feuds could easily be rekindled, and a single error in judgment could plunge their world into chaos. And caught between these two mighty dynasties, the savannah itself seemed to murmur a warning. The storm had already begun to break. The exile's shadow returns. For many seasons, the Stonecrest Pride had assumed the exiled male was gone for good, yet the savannah seldom allows a resolute spirit to fade into memory. Upon his return, gaunter, but with a newfound composure, it was evident he had done more than merely survive. He had been transformed. Each footfall spoke of a mission honed in isolation. The Ember Pride sensed his approach long before he was seen. Rumors rustled through the tall grass, unnerving even the most courageous among them. Mothers instinctively drew their cubs near, their gazes fixed on the distant ridges as if anticipating a threat to materialize from thin air. However, the deepest source of their anxiety was not his reappearance itself, but the silent certainty he projected, a clear sign that he was no longer a solitary wanderer. Unfamiliar paw prints followed his own, indicating a new ally was building power by his side. A coalition of two males bound by ambition possesses the strength to upend an entire territory. The Stonecrest veterans understood this truth, as did the youngest males learning to protect their lineage. As the exile's shadow fell over both domains, each sunrise felt like a challenge issued, waiting for a violent response. Ripples spread through the grasslands. The initial undeniable sign of a power shift arrived not as a roar, but as a profound silence, a tense quiet that caused every member of the Ember Pride to freeze in their tracks. Grazing herds altered their paths in a single night, birds scattered at the faintest vibration, and the very wind seemed to change its course, carrying back cryptic warnings. Human observers noted the strange movements from afar, but it was the prides who felt it most acutely. The exile's return was already recarving the landscape well before any open conflict. To the Stonecrest Pride, these shifts were like salt on old scars. Their dominant male, despite his experience, could feel the advance of a challenger who had shed all fear of banishment. A resolute lion returning with revitalized power could shatter years of stability in one night. A palpable tension coursed through their lands as the younger males intensified their training under the watchful eyes of the veterans. But they were unaware of how close the threat truly was. Hidden within the tall grass, the outcast observed the plains, as if deciphering a tale meant only for a lion poised to seize back what had once been lost. Whispers of the coming clash. As dusk fell, the Ember Pride felt the atmosphere constrict around their territory like a closing snare. Each lion moved with extreme vigilance, their ears tuned to distant sounds that signaled something more than just roaming game. The senior members formed a solemn circle, sensing the exile's return was merely the prelude to a far greater upheaval. Their young leader, still forging his authority, gazed at the horizon with a blend of apprehension and resolve. One wrong move could invite catastrophe upon them all. On the other side of the valley, the Stonecrest Pride reflected this same anxiety. Their seasoned leader examined a fresh set of prints, two distinct trails laid with audacity and purpose. The outcast had not only returned stronger, but he had also found a partner capable of defying established borders. A union of such resolute males could overturn the natural order, a fact not lost on any lion in the Stonecrest Pride. With the deepening of the night, far-off roars echoed across the plains, not as threats, but as long-measured declarations of intent. And with every reverberation, all prides knew, a new era of power and survival had dawned for every lion who claimed this land. The first test of valor. The Ember Pride was roused by a sense of disturbance. A far-off, low and steady rumble, an unmistakable sound announced that an intruder had pushed further into their territory. It was not an outright battle, not yet, but a calculated probe. Their young leader advanced stealthily, his muscles taut, aware that this single moment could shape his entire reign. Behind him, the lionesses created a defensive crescent around the young, their sharp eyes scrutinizing every rustle of grass, as if a threat lurked within each blade. Over on the plains, the exile and his new partner halted on a ridge, observing the domain with deliberate patience. The outcast who had once escaped this land, injured and solitary, now returned a creature remade strategically, deciding which borders to test and which to shatter. His confederate, younger but no less determined, shared his intense focus, both conscious that one audacious action could set off a cascade of conflicts. As the rising sun cast a golden hue across the sky, the two males made their way down to the river bend, a timeless meeting point where the sagas of countless lions had either started or concluded. On this day, the first steps of their challenge were formally taken. The standoff at the river bend. Down at the river bend, the atmosphere was so taut with tension that the wind itself seemed to hold still. The young leader of the Ember Pride moved forward, every fiber of his being, screaming that a challenger was nearer than ever. On the opposite bank, the exile observed silently, his new partner at his side, both of them gauging the pride's fortitude with the serene intensity that only hardship can bestow upon a lion. The females remained concealed in the reeds, poised to react at the first hint of peril. They were acutely aware that one false move could ignite a conflict for which none were prepared. Yet every lion stood firm, understanding that the result of this face-off would resonate well beyond the banks of the river. The silent assessment of strength. Evening descended softly upon the plains, but no soul within the Ember Pride was calm. The young leader could feel the outcast had pushed forward once more, his presence a palpable weight against their border like a final warning. Every member of the Pride moved with agitation, interpreting the silence as a sign that the scales of power were about to tip. From the ridge, the outcast watched their every move, with resolute focus, a lion readying himself for the moment when there would be no room for hesitation. His partner stood by, poised and vigilant, aware that an ascendant lion must seize the precise moment to forge a new destiny. When patience is exhausted, the sunrise brought a pallid light that offered no solace. The Ember Pride assembled under a gnarled acacia tree, every lion attuned to the volatile energy sweeping across the plains. Their young leader felt the pressure intensifying. The exile was past, probing their defenses. He was now seizing territory with calculated assurance. Across the way, the outcast lay low beside his partner, a lion prepared to issue a challenge, not with a roar, but with an intent more powerful than any sound. The lionesses could sense the approaching change like a tightening snare, their instincts screaming for caution, even as their spirits called for courage. Every lion there knew the unspoken truth: the time for waiting was over, and the next move would determine the destiny of both dynasties. A new reign ascends with the sun. As sunlight washed over the plains, a tenuous peace settled upon the land, felt by every lion. The Ember Pride watched as Stonecrest's veteran leader deciphered the retreating coalition's tracks, calculating the meaning of their withdrawal. Hope stirred even in the young, who knew that shifting loyalties would define their path forward. Your support allows us to chronicle these epic journeys. To see more tales of survival and dominion, subscribe and comment, 1 to continue or 2 to pause.